Greetings, fellow noob. Today's topic is crouching. People have asked me to make a guide about this for a pretty long time, so I thought I'd share what I know about it. It is a somewhat confusing and nuanced topic. What is it good for? What is it bad for? And so on. We're going to find out, but first we should really figure out what crouching even basically does. How does it work? So the numbers you see at the top come from CL_showPos, and the value at the top right is height, your height on the map. And as you can see, when you crouch, your height reduces by 17 units, and it takes a little bit of time. Now, if I go out and leave the start zone, it turns out that I'm floating. That is because I turned gravity down to 0. So I'm in the air, but not falling. If I crouch now, what happens is that first of all, if we look at the height again, it happens pretty much instantly. And secondly, it only reduces height by 8.5. So why is that? Well, because it's 8.5 at the bottom of your player model and 8.5 at the top. And that's kind of the basic thing crouching does. And thereby you can use it to avoid obstacles below you or beneath you. A different way to visualize this is in CSS, where you can turn on the bounding box of the player. I couldn't quite get this to work in Momentum Mod. This bounding box basically defines when you collide with something. And as you can see, crouching really reduces it quite a lot. At the top and at the bottom, it really makes you quite a bit smaller. So the most basic, and I'd also say most important function of crouching is just to avoid obstacles. The first obstacle can be the edge of the start zone, where if you get a very narrow cut of it, you can set off the timer later, basically part of the pre-strafe. And, I talk about that more in my pre-strafe guide. Also same for end zones, right? You can crouch and narrowly cut the end zone platform. And also, of course, you can direct teleporters better when you crouch, so you get a quicker drop. Again, all more explained in my pre-strafe guide. One thing that's a little bit more advanced, but still essentially the same thing, is crouchboarding ramps. Here, the obstacle you avoid is the spine of the ramp or maybe the back of the ramp. And in that way, you can, well, first of all, use it as an improvisation, just kind of to avoid an accident. But you can also use it in a more planful manner to get narrower cuts, tighter cuts, quicker cuts, whatever you want to call it, earlier boards, higher boards, all of that kind of stuff. Just generally control more where you board a ramp. But that can, of course, also fail. For example, the ramp you just saw at the very end, probably because I crouch boarded, I boarded it lower than I wanted to. So it's certainly not without dangers. The second thing that can happen accidentally when you crouch board ramps is that you end up surfing the ramp crouched because you uncrouch too late. And once you are crouched on a ramp, you cannot uncrouch until you leave the ramp because there's simply no space underneath you to perform that uncrouch. All right, before we get into the reasons why crouching on a ramp is bad or can be bad, let's first see a reason why it can be good, because there is actually a reason. So to showcase this, I'm going to go down on the ramp as low as I can until I fall off, currently not crouched. This is not going to be entirely accurate, by the way, but I'm going to explain why in a second. So currently I'm at 560 height. 550 still on the ramp, still not falling off. 542 or something is when I fall off, right? While not being crouched. Now let's do the same thing crouched. And see again when we fall off. 542, already lower than before. 534, 33, 30, 37. 27, 26 is when we fall off. That is pretty much the 17 unit difference I talked about before. Now, the reason why it's not 100% accurate is because CL_showPos, so the numbers at the top, are actually measured from your camera, not from your feet. The actual difference in height is 8.5 units, not 17. I couldn't think of a better way to show it than this. It's not 100% accurate, it's just 8.5. So it is a really, 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 really tiny optimization you can make. But why is it an optimization? Well, because going down on a ramp lower can, of course, give you more speed, essentially by converting negative z velocity from gravity into xy units. I mean, that's just a technical way of saying you gain more speed as you normally do when you go down on a ramp. So basically, whenever you are at the very bottom of a ramp, you can ask yourself, would I like to go even lower? And if the answer is yes, then crouching allows you to do that. And for example, stage 1 of Santorini is basically always surfed crouched because it just makes you faster. And the reasons why crouching on a ramp is bad, that I'm going to talk about in a second, just don't apply. Now, generally speaking, when you do this and you surf a ramp crouched, you don't want to do it the way I just did it, where you first ride the ramp crouched and then ride the ramp normally and then crouch while on it. The reason is because when you do that, you basically lose contact with the ramp for a very short time. If you look really closely, you can see it here. I mean, basically it cuts off your feet, right? You lose contact with the ramp for a really short time and then you drop back onto it. So you get another collision. It's really awkward. That's not really what you want to do. So if you want to surf a ramp crouched, you should already board it crouched. And then, you're forced to remain crouched on it until the end anyway. That's really the one reason I know of why surfing a ramp crouched can be good. Now that we know why crouching on a ramp can be good, we also want to know why it can be bad. So this is a situation I think most players are familiar with. I prepared a little save log here where if I press a turn bind, it comfortably catapults me into the end zone every single time. But if I do the same thing crouched, it doesn't work at all. I lose tons of units for some reason, and it's clearly because I'm crouched. That's the only difference. So the reason why this happens is sadly very obscure and complicated. I talk about it in a little bit of detail in my Surf Zeitgeist guide when I talk about stage 11. So I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible, but it is sadly just very complicated. So the thing is that crouching penalizes your air acceleration cap. And what this cap does is it defines how much your velocity can change every single tick, and thereby how much you can steer your velocity. The faster you are and the more you turn, the closer you get to exceeding this cap. And when you exceed it, you are inevitably gonna lose a whole bunch of units very, very quickly. And that's why you can't make this jump. Now, if this cap gets penalized by crouching, which it always does when you crouch, then you exceed it faster, you exceed it earlier with less speed and less turning. Now, the real problem isn't just crouching, but actually that a second such penalty is active at the same time in this case. And that's the one I mainly talk about in the Surf Zeitgeist guide, the ZVEL penalty. That applies when you are between 0 and 140 positive Z velocity. And if you think about it, this is basically this area here when you go up a ramp, as you start going up a ramp. So if I crouch at the same time and turn, you will kind of be able to see this, maybe, that I turn to the left, but I kind of keep sliding forward. Maybe you can see it. I think you can see it, how I keep sliding forward and then I kind of turn in. And that's the air axle cap. That's the game not being able to redistribute my velocity quickly enough in the direction that I'm steering. So that's why we can't make this jump. So now that we know all of this, we can also discern the cases where surfing a ramp crouched is still okay or even beneficial. And stage 1 of Surf Santorini is such a case, because here we are going to surf the ramp crouched and we are going to go through the ZVEL penalty range at the end. So both penalties will apply at the same time, but we are simply not fast enough or turning fast enough to cross the air axle cap anyway. So in a way, this is a little bit of an extreme case, but surfing this crouched is the optimal way to do the stage. Another simpler case we can find on stage 8 of Surf Santorini, where if you leave a ramp downwards, of course the ZVEL penalty never applies. So that's also perfectly fine to surf crouched. And again, the ideal way to surf the first ramp of this stage is to surf it crouched, because you can go lower. Another case would be a ramp where the upwards motion doesn't come from your turning into the ramp, but simply from the shape of the ramp itself, like on a sort of banana ramp, like at the end of Surf Ebony here, where surfing it crouched doesn't really make it better or something, but it also doesn't hurt. One sort of special and obscure case would be a ramp where you're never below 140 z velocity to begin with, so the z-vel penalty doesn't apply because you're always above it. And as you can see, riding a ramp like that crouched also shouldn't cause any issues, even though we are pretty fast and we are turning pretty fast while we are crouched. So when it comes to crouching on ramps, there's going to be some cases that provide a small benefit, some cases where it doesn't really matter, and some cases where you really shouldn't be doing it at all. In the end, the main thing is to understand the underlying principle, then you can discern those cases, and you don't have to be paranoid about it. That's really the most important thing. When it comes to how crouching and the entire air axle stuff works in the air, it's really no different than on ramps. The underlying mechanics are exactly the same. Crouching does not, for example, reduce the amount of units you gain from air strafing. It also doesn't reduce the amount of units you lose until you actually cross the air axle cap. And here I'm at almost 2,500 units, and only the crouch penalty is active, and I really need to turn very fast to hit the air axle cap. So this is just regular unit loss from air strafing here. So to hit the air axle cap, I really need to do something like this. That's the air axle cap, right? So it is a lot. Okay, what I did now is I turned SV gravity to -1, so I'm very slowly gaining Z velocity, and I am under the effect of the Z-vel penalty because I'm between 0 and 140 Z-vel. If I now crouch, nothing happens because I'm still not crossing the air axle cap, even at 2,400 units. I'm turning at 60 yaw speed, by the way. But if I turn a little bit faster, it hits me very suddenly and very brutally, right? And you can also see how I'm drifting. I'm absolutely not looking in the direction where I'm moving. That's the same phenomenon that I showed earlier on the ramp, where the game can't redistribute your velocity quickly enough in the direction you're steering, and that's why you get this drifting. All right, I hope this is somewhat helpful, interesting, informative. Crouching can give you small benefits, small advantages. It comes with some dangers, but if you know when they apply, how to avoid them, then yeah, it can turn you into a slightly better surfer. All right, have a good one. See ya.